Hello and welcome. Before we get started properly, I'd just like to say we are recording the session today for those who can't make it or who may like to rewatch, pause, or listen again. We are also using automatic captioning, which you can turn on in the control panel. These hopefully make the event more accessible to all. We welcome any suggestions or feedback on these adjustments and the event itself. A reminder that this is very much a Q&A, so please do add your questions to the Q&A section, which you'll find in the control panel. And we encourage you to upvote the questions you'd like to hear answered, as we likely won't be having enough time to go through them all. Hi everyone, my name is Nabiha, and I'm the Philanthropy and Partnerships Assistant here at ShelterBox. Thank you so much for being a part of this session and for showing your support in the aftermath of a series of devastating earthquakes that have hit Afghanistan. On the 31st of August, as people were fast asleep, a series of earthquakes hit the country. Many never woke up. It is an incredibly challenging crisis, with villages being wiped out overnight. We'll dive into more detail in a bit, but ShelterBox has been responding in the region with a team on the ground right now. And this would not have been possible without your time, energy, and support. Your compassion and curiosity to do more enables us to be there for families who have been struck by disasters, families like yours and mine. So a big, big thank you to you all. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Euan Crawshaw, the Director of International Programs at ShelterBox, about the current situation in Afghanistan and what ShelterBox is doing to respond. This will be followed by a Q&A, but feel free to start adding in your questions now. First, a short introduction. Euan Crawshaw has been the head of our international programs for 3 years. Before that, he lived and worked in South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Lebanon, Iraq, Myanmar, Colombia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, managing large emergency programs and field and area offices. He has 18 years of experience in humanitarian programs and emergency response, including as a former humanitarian lead at Oxfam, as a country director in the Philippines, and as a member of Save the Children's Global Emergency Response Team. Thank you so much for joining us, Euan. I'm going to pass over to you now for some insights into the current situation in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Nabiha. Lovely to be here this evening and great to see so many of you online. Thank you so much for joining. So what I'd like to do this evening is just give you an overview of what is currently happening in Afghanistan following the earthquake. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges about working in Afghanistan, how we address working with the Taliban government, and also getting into detail around what ShelterBox's response looks like so far. After that, I'm very, very happy to answer any questions that you have, and it's great to already see some questions coming in. So I'll talk hopefully for about 10 to 15 minutes to give an overview, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions before we finish. So as Nabiha said, at the end of August, a 6.1 magnitude earthquake struck Afghanistan in its eastern region late at night, so affecting Kunar and Nangarhar provinces in particular, which are near the border with Pakistan. The epicenter was about 30 kilometers northeast of the major city of Jalalabad. One thing it's important to note was this earthquake was particularly shallow, so at around a depth of between 8 to 10 kilometers beneath the surface, which meant that it had a really large impact and was very, very destructive. Large aftershocks as well occurred in the days afterwards, which further hampered the initial rescue efforts. So, according to recent statistics from the United Nations, this earthquake has affected 84,000 people to date, but it's expected that that number will rise because there's a large majority of the areas affected that are still, unfortunately, inaccessible. Over 2,200 people have sadly lost their lives, and nearly 7,000 homes have been destroyed, leaving thousands displaced and with no shelter. So with people having lost all of their homes and all of their possessions, support is needed as winter quickly approaches. So following the news of the earthquake, ShelterBox held a go, no-go meeting 2 days after, on the 2nd of September. And I'm pleased to say that the team secured their visas, and we sent an initial response team of 3 people to Afghanistan on the 14th of September, and they're currently in the earthquake-affected areas. ShelterBox will be responding through the provision of emergency shelter and household items, partnering with an agency in country called Islamic Relief Afghanistan, who've worked in Afghanistan and indeed the affected areas for many, many years. So the most affected areas in Afghanistan were in Kunar and Nangarhar provinces, and many families here have lost their homes and had all of their possessions destroyed. The earthquake occurred at night, meaning that no one had time to escape or gather any possessions and move. The de facto authorities in Afghanistan have launched a search and rescue response, as well as working to reopen some roads. However, these remain isolated communities, and there have been very little contact. Some of these communities are now only reachable by a 3 to 5 hour walk in difficult conditions. Our partner Islamic Relief carried out a needs assessment to understand what the needs are on the ground and what support people currently need after the earthquake. They found that 43% of the area affected by the earthquake remains inaccessible. This was in early September. And they also found that 65% of houses in the area were fully destroyed. When asked, community members said that urgent needs were for tents, for blankets, for kitchen sets, and for tarpaulins. 100% of people questioned stated that those were the most basic needs and assistance they required. So an international response effort has now started in difficult circumstances. Humanitarian agencies, including ShelterBox, are coordinating with the de facto authorities, and basic assistance has started to get through the affected communities. Our response will focus on emergency shelter needs, and providing people with potential cash assistance is also being considered. People affected by the earthquake will absolutely need support in the run-up towards winter, and the area affected by the earthquake is known for its harsh weather, freezing temperatures, and heavy snowfall. So in terms of working in Afghanistan and the challenges that we face, so Afghanistan is a fragile country with immense humanitarian need and a very precarious security and governmental situation. Cuts to the aid in the country since the Taliban returned to power have meant that Afghanistan now has some of the lowest humanitarian indicators in the world. So just one statistic for you is that currently 22.9 million people, before the earthquake even happened, so that's half the population of the country, require humanitarian assistance. So the needs are huge. Winter conditions will now create further vulnerabilities for the population affected by the earthquake in the mountainous, inaccessible region. The de facto authorities have increased access following the earthquake. However, there do remain some restrictions in place on travel to certain areas. I think it's also important to note that ShelterBox believes in no one without shelter after disaster, and we remain impartial and neutral in the delivery of aid. We acknowledge that there are issues working with the Taliban in relation to women's rights, but believe that working in Afghanistan now is justified given the needs and our expertise to address these. We will always put the humanitarian imperative first, and we will be delivering this project through a trusted local partner that do have female staff. And in this way, we will work as much as possible to ensure women's needs are met. In terms of ShelterBox's planned response, we have been in contact with our partner Islamic Relief since the earthquake happened, and a team have travelled to Afghanistan. That team consists of 3 staff members, our emergency coordinator, a shelter specialist, and a monitoring and evaluation coordinator, and they are on the ground at the moment supporting the response. We're initially going to be providing tents, household items, and winter clothing to 700 of the most vulnerable households. Some more detail on the items being provided are blankets, solar lamps, and also winter clothing kits for different ages that will support both women and children. This will obviously allow people to keep warm in the freezing temperatures. We're also going to be providing tarpaulins that people can use in different ways. So as an additional layer of protection on the roof or floor of their tent, or to be used to cover up possessions to protect them against the elements. as I said, the team are currently in country now. We finished the project design based on the conversations that our Islamic relief colleagues have had with affected communities. And it's hoped that distributions will start as early as next week. Um, so I'm hoping that gives you a bit of an overview in terms of our work and what the current situation in Afghanistan, and how ShelterBox is planning to meet the needs with our emergency shelter intervention. Um, what I'd like to do now is just hand back over to Nabiha, and we'll get into the Q&A. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ewan, for providing that insight. It's, like you said, incredibly, incredibly challenging to work in a country like Afghanistan. If you have any questions in the audience, please do feel free to pop them in the Q&A section. We also have some questions that have been sent in to us by those who couldn't attend the session today. So Mike asks, how are we going to ensure that the aid reaches those in need?
Yeah, thank you. Really, really good question. So obviously we'll use the results of the needs assessment that has been conducted, and we will be working with community members all the way through the project to identify the most vulnerable community members. Um, we already know that vulnerable groups in this area of Afghanistan include female-headed households. They include elderly populations, people with disabilities, and also families with many children. So those are the groups that we'll be initially be targeting. From the very beginning, straight after the earthquake, Islamic relief colleagues have been working with community leaders to explain how they plan to respond, and making sure that the most vulnerable community members receive our assistance. But yeah, that's a really important part of our work to ensure that the aid goes to the right people.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ewan, for that answer. Like you said, the first step in any recovery is to accurately understand what people need, and our partners are the ones who usually are able to give us a really clear picture by speaking to local communities. Towards the end of your segment, Ewan, you mentioned project design and affected communities. Can you elaborate a little bit on what do we mean by project design, and how do we factor affected communities within it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we refer to project design, we are basically saying, okay, we have the information from the community in terms of their needs. We understand what we can provide as ShelterBox, and we understand what resources we have available to be able to do that. So it's putting together the needs of the communities with the resources that we have, with the finances and people available, to ensure that we therefore deliver the best aid that we can. So we develop a project to say, okay, based on the needs, we're now going to support 7,000 households with emergency shelter items.
Right. Thank you, Ewan. There's a lot of thinking that goes on behind the scenes before that first aid item is delivered. Speaking
Absolutely.
of delivery, we have a couple of questions on distributions. We have one from Lorna. She asks, could you expand on how you are distributing in-kind items without affecting the local markets? And are items available on the market in suitable quantities for MPCA to be appropriate? While you answer that question, can you also elaborate on MPCA?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So all of the items in this project will actually be procured, so bought locally. So we'll also be actively contributing to local markets. So a key part of our work has been to understand what products are available in that area of Afghanistan, and what quality that they are. Um, our work has established that actually items can be procured locally, and that's what we will be doing. So we'll be contributing to the local markets by procuring all of the items in Afghanistan itself. In terms of therefore the markets having items available for potential cash assistance, which is still being considered. So MPCA is multi-purpose cash assistance, and this is a form of basically providing people with cash in order for them to buy things that they need themselves, rather than actually supplying the item and giving it to people through distributions. That's something that we're still considering. We haven't decided to do that yet. What we're definitely doing is providing those items bought locally for the number of households mentioned.
Right. Thank you, Ewan, for that. We also have one question from Liz who says, how was ShelterBox able to respond so quickly?
That's a really good question. So a lot of our work when we're not responding at ShelterBox goes to what we refer to as preparedness. So thinking about, okay, when is something likely to happen? And if it did, how would we respond quickly? In Afghanistan, our team in the Middle East and North Africa have been monitoring the situation in Afghanistan for quite a while in terms of the humanitarian situation and existing shelter needs, even before the earthquake. As part of that, they identified Islamic Relief Afghanistan as a potential partner earlier this year in terms of someone who's on the ground, has local staff members, understands the local culture and context, and with that we may be able to partner with if there were to be a response. So that is why, just 2.5 weeks after the earthquake, we've managed to get onto the ground to the affected areas and identify the needs, and we'll be responding very, very quickly with distributions happening next week. But that's only possible because of our preparedness efforts beforehand to say, okay, if something were to happen if in Afghanistan, who could we potentially work with? And we pre-identified the partner in Afghanistan. Thanks.
Thanks, Ewan. We have one question related to the preparedness piece from James. He asks, ShelterBox has responded before in Afghanistan. What can we learn from our previous responses in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, since ShelterBox was founded in the year 2000, we've actually responded in Afghanistan 5 times. Obviously, the context now is quite different to when we responded previously in terms of the de facto authorities and who's currently running the country. But absolutely, we still have contacts from previous responses that we're in touch with in terms of other international agencies and national agencies, as well as the United Nations coordination mechanism. So we do have contacts in Afghanistan from previous work, and therefore the team on the ground have been in touch with people that we worked with previously.
Right. Thank you, Ewan. We also have a couple of people interested on what you touched earlier on about women and girls in Afghanistan. Catherine asks, given the restrictions imposed by the Taliban authorities on Afghan women and girls, how can you ensure that they are receiving aid and shelter? These restrictions are also affecting female aid workers from other countries. How is ShelterBox responding?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. So we're aware that this is a challenge in the current operating environment. And we have spoken to our partner a lot about this. They do have female staff members. Some agencies have been able to maintain female staff members, and Islamic Relief Afghanistan are doing everything they can to work with community members to say, irrespective of age, gender, etc., the most vulnerable should be able to receive assistance following this earthquake. So we are working very closely with our partner to ensure that as much as possible, female and women have access to the aid that is available. In terms of affecting other international staff members, for various reasons, we decided the makeup of the initial team to be all male from ShelterBox. So the 3 team members that have gone to Afghanistan are an all-male team at the moment. That isn't to say that at some point we wouldn't send female staff, but it's obviously a consideration.
Thanks, Ewan. I think it would be important for us to also know a little bit more about the refugee influx or the returnees rather from Iran and Pakistan that have been sort of going into Afghanistan. Can you tell if there's any correlation or does that make this crisis a bit more worse?
Yeah, it definitely does. So over the past 6 months or so, there's been a large increase in Afghans returning from Pakistan and Iran. So people who have gone to seek work opportunities in neighboring countries, and now there's been a crackdown by authorities in Pakistan and Iran to send people back to Afghanistan. These people quite often arrive sort of being literally pushed across the border, are not able to sort of gather their belongings, and are kind of left very isolated, returning to Afghanistan. This earthquake obviously hit an area that does border with Pakistan. So some of those returnees would now also have been affected by the earthquake. So it definitely does exacerbate that situation. And one of the things ShelterBox is considering in terms of a potential second project going forward is actually working with those returnee populations who are increasingly vulnerable after the earthquake on a slightly longer term basis. But that's something that we're currently still considering.
Right. Thank you. Just talking about how difficult it is to actually execute a response in Afghanistan with the winter almost just around the corner and the kind of rubble and the kind of roads that exist or which don't exist anymore because of the earthquake. In terms of all of that access issue as well as with winter looming ahead, how do you think that's impacting the crisis right now?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a challenge because, as I said earlier, but data suggests that somewhere between 30 to 40% of the affected areas are still inaccessible, which means, local communities are having to survive themselves and support each other in response to this. So there is an aid effort sort of being established, and things are beginning to move, but it's a very, very difficult environment when actually, probably some of the routes, some of these villages, it will be by donkey and cart. So therefore, thinking about how you transport some of these items to affected population is something that our teams are going to be working very hard on and thinking through in terms of how best to do that. So yeah, it is a real challenge. The fact that this is in such a um, inaccessible area, and it's one that our teams are kind of challenged with on a daily basis.
Donkey and cart, on the side of a hill and you have like a valley next to you where you could fall off. Just talking about our staff that's there on the ground, in recent times, there's so many indexes that say the humanitarian workers are some of the most insecure, and face the extreme threats to their security. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been in daily contact with the team on the ground in Afghanistan. We have made decisions based on daily information that's available in terms of where the team are traveling to and what's possible in terms of the security situation. So it remains fairly fluid, and information changes. But what we have agreed is that obviously the team on the ground are the best placed people to make decisions and kind of plan movement based on what's happening on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, this is something we obviously take very, very seriously. We never would, willingly put our staff in danger, and the staff are in constant contact with other NGOs, security coordination bodies in Afghanistan, speaking with local community members, etc., regularly to ensure that they are as safe as possible.
Right. Thank you so much, Euan. We have a couple more questions in our Q&A section. We have one from Janine. She asks, in considering about cash, what are you thinking about how the monies will be spent and thinking about women and girls maybe being marginalized in households?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and obviously we will take that into consideration with any thoughts on what the cash program looked like. We're currently not planning immediately to distribute any cash. It's just something that is being looked at within the country, and the United Nations have a mechanism where lots of different agencies who are thinking about cash can come together called the Cash Working Group. And these are some of the things they are definitely talking about in those coordination bodies, how to make sure that any marginalized group sort of gets the right assistance. And, if people were to receive cash, therefore, what's available in the local market, what would they be spending on to meet their immediate needs, etc. So yeah, those are all real considerations.
Thanks, Ewan. We have a couple more. We have one from Debbie. She's asking, which I think you have answered a bit, but can you elaborate on the respective roles of SB and our partners IR? What are the areas of expertise from each organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So our team on the ground are specialists from ShelterBox, and they include our one of our shelter technical experts, who can advise on what a project looks like, on what aid items are available, etc. So they will be working very closely with a partner to assess the quality of items available in the local market. We also have a team member who's a specialist in monitoring and evaluation. So again, supporting the partner to say, okay, once we've distributed these items, how are we going to follow up to ensure that they're being used correctly, to ensure that they were the right items, in terms of lessons learned and what we may do differently again in another response. And also supporting the partner directly with kind of when we finish the project to say, okay, how did that project go? Was it a success? Let's have an evaluation to see how the community found the results of the project. So it's a real even split in terms of ShelterBox's role, and Islamic Relief's role in terms of supporting and managing the distributions and thinking about the quality of the work and the project that we want to deliver.
Thanks, Euan. Yes, there's so much work that our wonderful partners all across the world support us with, and yeah, nothing that we do would be possible without their support. Um, our last question for today is from Martin. He asks, how long do you think the response will last?
Great question. So usually an initial emergency response to an earthquake of scale and size like this would last somewhere between 3 and 6 months. So obviously the distributions being planned may take um, about 2 or 3 weeks to kind of do once we start them to make sure that everyone has received the assistance. And then following that, we would follow up with community members, etc. But yeah, generally we expect a response like this to last somewhere between 3 and 6 months.
Thank you so much, Ewan. That was so insightful and just such an insight into how everything works at ShelterBox and the considerations that humanitarian actors have to make while delivering a response, especially to as challenging a location as Afghanistan. That is all the time we have this evening, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this session informative and engaging, and a special thanks to Ewan for sharing your valuable insights. Before we wrap up, I'd like to highlight how you can support ShelterBox in our response to the Afghanistan earthquakes. There are several ways you can help. By donating, your contributions can make a significant difference in providing essential aid to those affected by the earthquake in Afghanistan, as well as other disasters across the globe. By fundraising, organizing events or campaigns to raise funds and spread awareness of ShelterBox's work. And spreading the word. Share our mission and efforts with your network to amplify our reach. For more information on how to get involved, please visit our website. Thank you so much for joining and supporting us this evening. I hope it provided an interesting insight into ShelterBox's work. Hope you all have a wonderful and restful evening. Thank you so very much.